webinar is on version 9, purchasing and receiving. Now, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. I try to pay attention to that if I can, and interrupt me even if I'm in the middle of something. I would prefer that you ask me while it's fresh in your mind, then wait until the very end and then try to remember what your question was. So again, version 9, purchasing and receiving. So we're going to go to, I'm going to start us off here, and I'm going to go into purchasing and then into purchase orders. Okay, I'm going to create a new purchase order. Okay, now typically I recommend that when you're making a purchase order that you fill out this header information first. I'm sorry about that. So I fill out this information up here on the top first, generally speaking. PO number will generate itself. It will create a number for you, but you can change that to be anything that you want. So I'm just going to call this training. Okay, vendor code, pretty self-explanatory. So I'm just going to go with one of the vendors that I know I have in here. PO type. You have two options here, drop ship and marked for. Now, David, I see that you're on the line, so you probably more than anyone else recently, we've talked about the difference between drop ship and marked for. So this is just going to kind of be a review for you. But drop ship means that you want the vendor to send the merchandise or drop ship it directly to the store that you're ordering it for. Now, you could order for multiple stores all on the same PO and it still be a drop ship, meaning that you send your vendor a PO and it says, I need this group of items to be shipped to this store, this group of items to be shipped to this other store. Now, the marked for means that you're going to order for all of your stores, but you're going to have all of the merchandise sent to one centralized location. And then that centralized location is then going to disperse them amongst the stores that want it. So that's what PO type is. Ship to store, pretty self-explanatory. Which store are you ordering for? Or if you're ordering for multiple stores, this will say selection, okay, or SEL, I should say. The associate's going to default to whoever is currently logged in. The terms are going to come over from that vendor file, but if you don't have terms in your vendor file, or maybe your terms are different on this particular purchase order, you can change this at the time. So maybe they're offering you a better deal if you prepay it. Okay, and we'll just say I prepaid it today. Same thing with the account number. If you have the account number set up in your vendor file, it will pull that over. If not, you can manually change it right here. I do recommend, though, that if you have accounts or terms with your vendors, it's to your advantage to get that set up in your vendor file so you don't have to remember to touch these each and every time. Date fields are pretty self-explanatory. Order date obviously is going to default to today, and that is the day that you're placing the order. Ship date can either be the day they tell you they're going to ship it, the day you request that they ship it, or if you want them to ship it as soon as they can fill the order, I typically leave that set on today's date. So now if you have multiple ship dates, I know a lot of times with pre-season orders, they'll give you multiple ship dates. Put your earliest ship date in here, and then after you receive that shipment, come into the PO and change the ship date to the next ship date that you're expecting more product. Now the cancel date is a field you do not have to use if you don't want to, but I do recommend that you use it if what you are ordering is time sensitive. Okay? So holiday merchandise, or if you're ordering things for an upcoming sale or for an upcoming event, this cancel date really comes into play. So now the last edit date will automatically update on its own. It is a system-generated field, as well as all these fields in the fill status. So at this point, we have our purchase order done. So at this point, I'm actually ready to go in and add some items there. Now, depending on your settings and system preferences, when you go into choose edit items, it will show you, and I believe my system is set up to let me pick any one that I want. There's a setting in system preferences that says limit vendor code to only items, limit the item vendor code to the same vendor code that's on the purchase order. If that's checked, you will see only the vendor that you chose. If it's not checked, like in my case, it's going to show me everything in my inventory, and then I can narrow it down. Now, my data is based on a customer that orders their products from multiple vendors. So that's why their setting is not turned on to limit them to where the item vendor has to match the PO vendor. So it is based on that system preference. So once you have the items up that you want, you can then use your quick lookups or your filter to find the items that you want, and you're going to fill in the dot quantity with what you're ordering. So I order 2 of this, 3 of these, 3 of these, just kind of, okay, so I'm just ordering a few of those. You'll notice that I'm in the dot quantity field. That is the quantity that I want to put on the document that I'm making. In this particular case, that document is a purchase order. So this quantity is the quantity that I'm ordering. But be aware that you will have dot quantity on your receiving document, on your transfer documents, on your sales orders, on your receipts. It is kind of the general, this is the quantity we want on this particular document field. Once you have found the items that you're going to reorder, you may realize that you have a couple of new items that you've never carried before. If that's the case, what I recommend, first thing I want you to ask yourself, is this a unique item that is what it is, or is it a style or an item that comes in different sizes and or different colors? So for most of you, your style is going to be based on 3 fields: the DCS, the vendor code, and then one of your description fields. In this particular case with my data, it's based on description too. So even though you can see that these items right here, they're all sheer guards in different sizes and different colors, the vendor has given each one of those a unique product number. And so for that reason, they are not considered a style, because the description too, vendor code, and DCS is not the same for all of these items. It's good with the DCS, it's good with the vendor, but the description too is where I lose the similarities. So to add in a unique item, like if I were going to make another one of these sheer guards, I can click on New and then enter in that new product information, filling all of this information in that will come up here. So what department it belongs to, and I'm just going to randomly choose something. So, okay, I'm going to choose my vendor, which is, okay, my description 1 is, okay, my description 2, we'll just say it's, okay, the color is blue, no, so we'll say it's a medium, the cost, $15, price, we'll say $34. Okay, now if you have a UPC at the time of and you are using UPCs, by all means put the UPC code in there. Most of the time, though, at the time of ordering, you may not know the UPC code. You usually find that out when you're receiving. But if you have it, absolutely go ahead and fill it in. Now, one unique thing with version 9 as far as the data entry on a purchase order, you may have noticed that I did not enter in any quantity here. That's because in version 9, I have to save my data entry first, then come down to my dock quantity and say how many of them I'm going to order. And once I fill in my dock quantity, that item will become part of my purchase order. Now, let's say that the items that you need to enter in are a style. So they share the same DCS, same vendor code, same description field that your style is based on. And when we're done here, I'll show you where you can see what description you're using. For most of you that are new or on version 9 and you have not upgraded from version 8 or version 7, your style is probably based on description 2. For those of you that have upgraded from a previous version, it's more than likely based off of description 1. But I'll show you where to double check it. Okay? Now, to enter in a style, we're going to come over here to Style View. Okay, and I'm going to create a new style. Again, I'm going to choose my department, put my vendor in. Now, again, if you had that setting I talked about entered in where it had to match the PO vendor code, the vendor code here would have already been filled in for you. Okay, description 1, we'll just say webinar style. Okay, and we'll just, it doesn't really fit, but we'll use ladies' shoes. Okay, we're going to put in a cost of $17. We'll sell this for $39.99. Okay, now with the style, this is what they all share in common, or most of what they share in common. It could be that your larger sizes, your extended sizes, may be a higher cost and price, and I will show you how to deal with that. So I do want to enter in some colors here, though. So I'm going to come over here to the Edit Attribute and Size, and I'm going to overwrite this asterisk, and I'm going to put in red, white, and blue. Okay? So those are the 3 colors that I have available. I'm going to click OK, and you will see that your grid expands. So we recommend that you always start with the smallest size of your first color and work your way over to the largest size. When you get to the end of the largest size of that color, come back to the smallest size of the next color. So I'm going to go ahead and skip over the 5 and 5.5, and we'll start with 6. And I'm just going to keep this simple. Then I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to skip over those. Okay, and then we're going to, again, go back. Now, what I'm using to jump myself back is the down arrow and the home key. So let's say in the blue, we do actually have one of those, but that's the only one that we're carrying the 5.5 in. Okay, when you get to your last entry, it is very important that you press the Enter key or you move it out of that field. Otherwise, it doesn't actually take that as an entry. I always tell people it's very much like Excel. If you type something in Excel and you don't move it out of that field, it doesn't actually stay in there. You can kind of double check yourself by the total for the size 11 or whatever size you're looking at. Okay, once that's all in there, I can go ahead and save it, and that's going to create a line item for every size and color. It only had to make 32 line items, so now I'm going to actually add a button over here. And that button I'm adding is called grid values. So what I want to do, if my cost and my price are different on my larger sizes, first I'm going to start with my unit cost. It's changing the value that is in my grid to be based on cost. So let's say that my 10s are 19. Okay, and my 11s are 20. Okay, now again, you'll see that it's still blinking there, so I need to move it out of there to adjust it. Now, if I adjusted my cost, I may also want to adjust my unit price. So I'm going to change my 10s to $42.99. Okay, we'll do the same here. And then we'll make these $43.99. Okay, so once I've changed these sizes, I'm going to go back to grid values and change it back to quantity, because that's where I'm going to expect it the next time that I get in there. Now that I've changed those, I'm ready to go back into my item list. So I'm going to click OK there. That brings me back into the item list. I'm done with everything. I've got my reordered items on there. I've got a new item and a new style that I entered in. I'm done with this purchase order. So I'm going to click OK. And that brings back all of the items that I reordered, plus it brings in all of those items that I just created. And you'll notice on some of them, my cost and my price is higher. Okay? So that's everything that I entered in plus everything that I reordered. I look at my total. If that's, correct, I will leave that alone. Now maybe I want to let the vendor know, call before shipping, because we've had a problem with our shipper showing up when we're not there or whatever. So I'm going to put an instruction in here to call the store before shipping. So that way we have a heads up that it's on its way. So know that you can hopefully not have as many typos as I have, but you can put any instructions on here that you want regarding this purchase order. Now, if you have special instructions about a given item, you can highlight any given item and go to your F5 key. No, we don't. We took it off there. So most of you probably have an item note field that's been added over here to the side. Let me save this real quick, and I'm going to add it in just so you can see it. Okay, so let's just say for argument's sake that on this item right here, this item is for special order, that one's for special order 333. In other words, I'm letting the receiving clerk know, don't put this out on the floor with everything else. This item right here is specifically for a customer on their special order. Okay? Now, I always point this out to everyone that I train on purchase orders. If you forget to save and you immediately back out, you are going to get the following message. Purchase order has been modified. Canceling will discard all changes. Do you want to continue? And it looks like yes would be the proper answer here because it's highlighted. But what you're actually saying is, yes, I want you to cancel all my changes. I don't want to cancel what I just spent the last 30 or 40 minutes creating. So if you get this message, always say no to it unless you really do want to throw away the purchase order and start over. But say no to that. And that's basically, if you get that message, it's your indicator that you forgot to save before you backed out. So you save your purchase order, Now when I back out, I don't get any error message. So any questions about the purchase order? Okay. So I promised I would show you the setting that determines what your style is based on. So if you go to Options and System Preferences, then open up Local Preferences, open up Merchandise, and then highlight General, you'll see about halfway down it says Style Definition. Well, style definition can be based on Description 1 or Description 2 or both. With whatever choice you choose in here, the style definition is also based on the DCS and on the vendor code. That is not optional, that is not editable, but which description field you make part of your style definition is. So I'm going to leave mine on Description 2 because that's what works for this data. Okay? So purchase order gets sent off to the vendor receives it, they fill the order, and of course they don't send you everything that you ordered because, you know, that would make too much sense. So you get a delivery and it's based on the purchase order that you made a few months back. So when you first go into purchasing and vouchers, it is going to bring you into your former voucher list. This is how this is where all of the vouchers that you have made for whatever time frame you're looking at, and in this case I'm looking at a month-to-date time frame, it would show me all of the vouchers that I had created in that time frame. Now if you want to change the time frame that you see this for, you can change it to any of the time frames that you see in here. Okay? I'm going to cancel that though, I want it to be on month-to-date. But most of the time when you get into this point, you're not concerned with what you've already received. You're more concerned with what you're about to receive. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to New. And you will notice that the first field that I have on my voucher is a place to reference the PO. So if I have a PO that has been made in the system, I'm going to reference it. I'm going to take my little training PO here. That's the one I want. And click OK. Now you'll notice it filled in my vendor code. It filled in the store I'm sending it to, my terms, but I have no items on there. You'll notice on the side menu there is a PO item button. If you have referenced a PO, this button will be highlighted. If you did not reference a PO, you just made the voucher with no PO, this button would be gone and you'd have to use Choose Edit Items. Now the difference between these two buttons, the PO items is just going to show you just the items that you ordered on the purchase order, whereas Choose Edit Items is going to show you everything in your inventory, and you would have to go and find the items just like we did originally on the purchase order. So I'm going to go to PO items. It shows me everything that I have. Now, I generally tell people if you get 70% or more of your order, you'll probably find that it's quicker to click on the Receive To. That's going to fill in all of your quantities, your dot quantities. You'll see they match your ordered quantity all the way down. But if I only got 70%, maybe I didn't get these 4 items. Or maybe I didn't get any size 10s. Okay, so I'm going to zero out, whoop, wrong column. Zero out my 10s. Okay. Let's see if I have it. There's another 10 up there. Okay. So once I have once my dot quantity matches what I physically received, I'm then going to click the OK button over here on the side, and that will bring back everything that I said I received. Okay, now if we look through here, I shouldn't have any more size 10s. Well, I did actually. So I'm going to remove this item. I'm going to remove this item. We're going to double check. Okay, I think I got them all. So now that I have all of the items that I have received from the purchase order, I'm going to not only, I've double checked my quantity in the PO item screen. It's not a bad idea though to double check them again when you get to the voucher screen. Double check your cost and double check your price. Ultimately, you want your voucher total to match the bill that they send you or the invoice that they send you. But very rarely, it's not very common for vendors to send the invoice with the merchandise. If you are one of those retailers that gets your invoice before or with your merchandise, consider yourself extremely lucky. Most retailers get it within a few days to a week after the product has arrived. So if you can verify your cost, verify your cost. If you can't because you don't have an invoice, that's something that's going to have to be verified later. Okay? You'll notice that it shows the comment that we put on or the instruction that we put on that purchase order. And if I had, let's see, I'm going to put this on hold for a minute. I want to add the item no field. The only problem with 9 is you can't add new fields while you're in the screen. So we're going to go to held, going to unhold, unhold my voucher, and so now I can scroll down. Okay, where is my note? Oh, you know what? It was on that one item that I didn't receive any of. So let's see if I can find it. So I think it was this item. So let me put one on there. Okay. So you see the note that was put on the purchase order carries over to the voucher. Okay, that's the benefit of the note field. It's not something that necessarily prints on a purchase order, although if you wanted to, we can have it print on the purchase order. But it is in the computer, and thus it carries over to the voucher. So hopefully the receiving person is paying attention to this and they see, oh, wait a minute, I need to pull this item back. Okay? Once you have verified everything that you can verify, you're going to click on either Update Only or Print Update. The only difference between those two options is one is going to print out the voucher, one is just going to update it. It's not going to give you a printout. But both of them, when they update, the voucher has a big effect on your data. When you update a voucher, it's updating your quantity, your cost, your price, your last received date, your first received date, your PO is getting updated, your unfilled status is getting updated. So there's a lot of different things that are happening with this one simple single click. So I'm going to go ahead and update this. And yes, I'm going to let it modify my inventory prices. Okay, and it's letting me know inventory will be updated. Okay, so there is my former voucher for this particular vendor. Now, I go about my business, and a week later the invoice comes in. So I take the invoice, I go into purchasing and vouchers. I find the right voucher. There may be 5 or 6 or 50 of them in here. I find the right voucher, and I go into Form View. Now, I go into Form View just to kind of double check, especially if you receive multiple shipments from this company. I am comparing it to the right order. So I go through and I look and everything is correct. Okay? So I then go, hang on real quick. Okay, so I go through, I verify all my costs are correct, everything's good. So my subtotal matches the subtotal on my invoice. That's a good sign. If the subtotal here matches the subtotal on your invoice, then you know that your unit costs are correct. Now, to enter in freight charges or discounts or fees, depending on where you've put it on your screen, you can put your freight up here. Okay, mine happens to be at the top of the screen. You can enter in a discount percent that they gave you or a discount dollar. You can also enter in any additional fees they may have charged you, small order fees, graphic fees, anything along those lines. Okay, ultimately, we want your voucher total to match the total on the invoice. We don't want to pay a bill that we haven't verified we owe. So when you know that it does match, and only when it matches, that's when I want you to put in your invoice number. Okay? I'm going to put in the date. Both are required. If you are linking with the accounting software, both fields are required in order for it to send it over to accounting. Okay, then I'm entering in the amount on the invoice. Okay, and then I'm going to save those changes. Now, you will notice that nothing I have done, the freight, the invoice number, nothing I've done has affected the inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and it tells me inventory will not be updated. Well, I didn't do anything to my inventory that I need to worry about saving, so that's okay. Okay, now that particular voucher is done. Now, let's say that we're a week later, we get the rest of that order. So I'm going to go in and reference my purchase order. I'm going to go to PO items, click on Receive Due. It's going to fill in the quantities of the items that I have not received. And then I'll click OK. I'm going to bring those items back. Okay, now here is my new total. Now I'm going to go ahead, I don't have my invoice for it yet, so I'm going to go ahead and update only and let it go ahead and modify the prices and let it update my inventory. So you'll notice here on my former voucher list that I'm able to see when the invoices come in. So I can easily see which ones I'm still waiting on. So because of that, even if you're not linking with an accounting software, entering in your invoice number and date is a good habit to get into because it lets you know which bills you're waiting on and which bills you've seen and which ones you haven't seen. Now let's say that that invoice for this particular one comes in and we go into Form View to make sure that is in fact the one that we want, but we realize that this blue medium is not supposed to be $15. It's supposed to be $15.99. I cannot change it. I know you guys can't tell that I'm actually typing. Even though it looks like I could type there and edit it, it is not an editable field. If anything that is item related, quantity, cost, price, it is not editable in a former voucher. So there are a couple of ways that you can handle it. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, inventory is not going to be updated. So even if it did allow us to change this, what would be the point if the inventory is not going to be updated with that information? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay, but I need to fix it on the voucher because when my invoice comes in, or now that I'm looking at my invoice, this is not matching and I need it to match. So we go through a step. If you're linking with the accounting software, okay, whether you're linking or not, we want you to reverse the original document or void it. It's just a fancy term for voiding, okay? And we're going to put down here in the comment to wrong cost on just put wrong cost. Okay, I click OK. Now I'm going to make a copy of this one. So I don't have to start over from scratch, but now that I've made a copy, I can then go in here and I can type in $16. Okay, and change that and ultimately change my voucher total. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in my freight. Okay. Now my total matches, and because my total matches, I feel comfortable putting in my invoice number. Okay, put in today's date. Okay. Once that's done, I go ahead and update only. Now my inventory is going to go in with the correct cost, so it's going to be updated. But what you will see, let me sort this by voucher number so it's easier to see. What you will see is here is the original document that was incorrect and needed to be voided or reversed. I always tell people, look for the ED to find the original one. This is the one that did the voiding to the document or the reversing. That's the action document. This last one is the corrected copy. So if you have to reverse, copy, and correct, you will end up with 3 documents for that one receiving shipment. Okay? Any questions about vouchers? Okay, a couple other things that I want to show you in here. You can make a voucher without a PO. I can just come down here to the vendor code. Well, it would help if I type in the right vendor code. Okay, I can type in the vendor code I want, go to choose edit items, and just like we had done when we were looking at the PO, I can go in and I can find the items that I get from this vendor or that I'm receiving from this vendor. And if they're not in the computer already, then I can add them in just like we did on the previous voucher. So I'm going to say that I got 2 of those carriers. We'll get 3 of those. And then, of course, I could click on New and add in a new one. So once I've found the items or I've entered in the items that I just received, I click OK, and it brings those items back, just like a regular voucher. Typically, we do recommend that you use purchase orders and vouchers, but if you only want to use one, you have to use the voucher. The purchase order is a planning document, kind of like a shopping list. I always tell my customers, you know, most of us know that if we go into the grocery store with a shopping list, we're going to do a better job of getting what we actually need to get. I'm not saying that we don't buy things that aren't on our list, because human nature is that we do, but it at least keeps us on track for what we need to get. Now, you go through the checkout line, everything's bagged up, you get it home, you get it all put away. What do you do with your grocery list at that point? You typically throw it away. Most of us are not going to save that in our junk drawer for a later time. When we're ready to go to the store again, we'll make a new list. So that's kind of the way I want you to think of your purchase order and your voucher. The purchase order is what you're hoping to get. The voucher is realistically what you did get. Okay? So if you only are going to use one, it has to be the voucher. So I'm going to go ahead and update this one. Now, the only difference between receiving merchandise and returning merchandise is this setting right there. So it defaults to receive because that's more common. 95% of the time, you need it to be on receive. But there are occasions where when you open the box and you look at what's in there, you realize that there's something you're going to need to send back, either because it's damaged, it's not what you thought it was going to be, they sent a substitution instead of what you wanted and you don't want that substitution. That's when you would make a return voucher. I get asked a lot of times, when do I use a return voucher and when do I use an adjustment memo? my general rule of thumb is if the vendor is involved in the process of getting rid of that product, whether they tell you, oh, just throw it away and we'll send you a new one, or they ask you to send it back to them and then they'll send you a replacement, if the vendor is involved, make it a return voucher. If it happens a month, a couple weeks after you've received the product, it's out on the floor, now you're just going to mark it out of the inventory because it's damaged, the vendor is not taking it back, then do an adjustment memo. The vendor's not involved in that process. So, but that is the only difference between a return voucher and a receiving voucher. Okay? Any questions about anything that I've covered today? Anyone? Well, then let me open it up for any questions about anything that has been on your mind with Retail Pro. Okay. Well, if no one has any questions, then I will go ahead and conclude this webinar. And I want to thank you so much for being patient with me and our late start. And like I said, feel free to go up and check on YouTube. We are posting all of our webinars up on YouTube now, so you can watch them anywhere, anytime that you want. And this one will be posted up there by the end of today. I just happen to be the one that posts those up there. So thank you again, and join us for any webinar that interests you. We are always happy to have, people join in. The more the merrier, as they say. But thank you again for joining me today. And everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.